Have you ever worked incredibly hard for something? You have set a really high goal, and after so many years, you finally accomplished it. Maybe it was weight loss. Maybe it was graduating and getting the degree or many degrees. Maybe it was the promotion that you have been wanting for so many years, or a new career, a new job that was 10 times more than what you were making at your previous job. And so you hit this goal, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel empty. Instead of feeling relief, you automatically think, what's next? It's really uncomfortable for you to sit in the success in your accomplishments. If any of what I said just resonated with you, you could be struggling with the performance identity. You could be very high achieving, overachieving, but you still feel a loss of self. And it's because you probably found your identity, worth, and value in the things that you achieved, but you know deep down at the core of who you are, it's not fulfilling for you. And so if this is you, I encourage you to continue to listen. So you might be thinking, if I'm feeling these things, I thought I was going to feel fulfilled. I thought I would feel like my life is changing. I thought the success would look different or feel different in my body, my mind, my soul, my spirit. And what's coming up for you could be resentment or feeling ungrateful. Well, I just want to encourage you that this performance identity that you're living from is something that you did for survival, even as young as your youth, right? Maybe you felt like you could only be loved, you could only be valued if you accomplished things that were good. If you didn't do anything that was good, then you were unlovable or unvaluable. The problem, or invaluable. The problem with that is what you learn to do and to live from and perceive love and give love, from that survival pattern, it's now not serving you as an adult. It's not only running your life, but it is ruining your life. Statistics have shown that 33% of people that are living from this high achieving, overperforming, um, actually perfectionist mentality end up getting diagnosed as being clinically depressed because you keep going on these highs, really extreme highs, and then really low lows. Now, I'm not saying achieving goals and, doing things in excellence and having a high standard for yourself is wrong. It's not. But if you're doing it from a wrong motive and you're doing it to find your identity and value in it, that it's not, that if you fail, you feel like you're falling apart. If you're succeeding, you feel like, you're on top of the world. When you're putting your identity in that, that's when it becomes unhealthy. So this performance identity has come in, um, as a belief system that you formed as a child. So we're going to talk about what we're going to do part one and part two series. I'm breaking down the fractured identities. I talk about this often. It's because it's something that I had to self heal from, because I realized for the majority of my life, I had been living from the trauma formed identities. And I was living from that place for survival in my home, survival in my young adult, age. I had learned that in order to be loved, I needed to do all of these things, which were not true. And I was self-silencing. Right. And it wasn't until I had my break, literally physically, my body physically broke down. My spirit became extremely broken, and my mind and my soul and all of that is when I finally realized that I had been living from a false trauma informed identity for almost 43 years of my life. So before we continue, I always like to give a quick review. What are the seven trauma formed identities? One is people pleasing. Number two, it's the performance identity, which we're going to talk about today. Then we have the masked identity, meaning you wear mask and you morph into whoever someone needs you to be, whoever's in front of you. And that's extreme self-silencing. The validation seeking identity, the self-abandonment identity. There's also the victim identity and the control identity. Just to name a few. And so I'm going to do a deeper dive study and teaching on this so it can help you, because statistics also have shown that 70% of adults are walking around this earth living from a trauma-formed identity that they took on as survival as they were children, and now it's running their lives. So what you think is your personality, it's actually a masked, fractured identity. Statistics also show that your subconscious mind, actually research shows that, becomes fully formed by the age of 7, right? So whatever happened to you in utero up until the age of 7, good, bad, or indifferent, your brain starts to see the world that way. Receive love, give love. If you were rejected as a child, if you grew up in a physically abusive, emotionally abusive, or if you were SA'd as a child, your little brain couldn't grasp these adult concepts. So for survival, you started shrinking and going, okay, well, in order to have value in this world and to be safe, I need to people please. To be safe, I need to perform. To be safe, and the list goes on and on and on and on, right? And so, how this matures into your adult life is you're showing up from a fractured identity, and it's not living in your authentic self. And you're actually, if you keep self silencing over time and years, it actually does something to your nervous system. Okay. And that's what happened to me. Your body breaks down, your body keeps a score of everything. If you struggle with people pleasing, always saying yes when you mean to say no, you start harboring unforgiveness and resentments towards others. It's hard for you to advocate for yourself if you struggle with a masked identity. You're constantly living in this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And out of those trauma responses, this is when you start putting on all these different fractured identities for survival. Okay. So let's talk about the performance identity. The performance identity isn't the same as ambition. So I just want to clarify that it is great to be ambitious. I love ambitious people. I'm very ambitious. Ambition is healthy. Excellence is healthy. Working hard is healthy. But performance identity happens when your achievements become the measuring stick of your worth, your self-worth. So an example of that would be is if you maybe don't get into the college that you set that high goal for and the high standard, you unravel, you spiral. A lot of people become depressed. You think that your life is over, that you no longer have value because you found your identity in those things. A healthy response would be, okay, that's fine. That's not in the cards for me. It doesn't mean that I'm not smart. It doesn't mean that I won't be successful. This is just a redirection, right? So when you're in your performance identity, instead of you saying you accomplish something and feeling good about it, hitting those benchmarks, you begin believing that you are something because you accomplished something. And when you don't accomplish something, you feel like you're nothing and you have no worth or value. Um, you also might think that if you stop achieving, then you're not valuable to yourself or to anybody. During the housing crisis in 2008, and there was a big collapse in the market. I was living in New York at the time, and it was so grievous to me to wake up daily and read the news or watch the news and hear about someone else unaliving themselves again because they lost all their money in the stock market or their house is foreclosed. So they couldn't see a way out of it. So they thought just ending their life was the answer. And it's not, because they had made their identity in their apartment complex and their penthouse and their company position. And when that got taken away, they were like, well, what's the point of living? Who am I without these things? That is the performance identity. Okay. That's dangerous. If that's the mindset that you're showing up and receiving, seeing the world through, right? You are basically surviving. So the core lie, if you struggle with the performance identity, the core lie that you believe is that you have to earn your worth in the world. Okay. You have to earn your worth. Um, and then once you take that route, right? Then all of these things happen, right? Failure feels like rejection. I did struggle with that. Some of you know my past. I used to be a professional dancer, auditioned a lot in San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. And I remember when I would not get a job, it was like my world was falling apart. Okay. I'd worked so hard. I had trained so hard. I'd put all my eggs in this one basket. And, I took out all these college loans, school loans to go to a really good school and fly all across the world to go to this training program. And now is the time where everything is supposed to work out, right? And so when I would consistently audition and audition and audition, which is just the process of being a performer, it has a lot, it usually doesn't have to do with your talent. Most of the time, it has to do with, you know, how do you fit within the group? They're forming a group, right? They're forming all of these things, right? And they're not necessarily saying no to you. They're also saying, like, maybe no, not yet, or not right now. But because I struggled with so much rejection, failure, because I put my identity in it, failure felt like my life was over. Okay. Maybe you were studying for law school and you have to take the LSAT and you keep failing, right? If you don't have a healthy view of your own self-worth, you would start to think, instead of going, okay, maybe I need to study more, maybe get a tutor more, there's some concepts I'm not grasping, you would internalize the failing of a test as you're stupid, right? That you're not valuable, that this is not maybe what you should be doing. And then you would pivot into something completely different based off of those results. Okay. That is a performance identity. Um, a core lie, again, that you believe is that rest feels irresponsible, right? When I was working at some of my corporate jobs, I remember working 50, 60 hours a week. No one told me to work 50, 60 hours a week, but I told myself I was working on the weekend. It was really hard for me to take a break. I thought that if they could see how hard I'm working and how much I care for the company, then it meant my job was secure all a while I was um, depleting myself and not pouring back into myself all that I poured out. It was hard for me to say no for a lot of things because I thought that saying no would um, slide me back down the scale, right, of the line of promotion. That's the performance identity. Maybe you struggle with a core lie that you could be experiencing is that someone criticizes you and criticism feels devastating, right? It feels like an attack on who you are when criticism is actually healthy correction to get you back in alignment. I struggled with that greatly because I grew up with a very critical mom. And because I was always being nitpicked, any criticism from that point on, I internalized it as Jennifer is being picked apart. Okay. And so if that's how you are showing up, someone gives you a critique, you fall apart, your identity is tied to that, tied to your perfectionism. Um, you could be struggling with a performance identity. Maybe success is not enough. No matter how much money you bring in, the house you live in, the car that you drive, the bag that you own, the career accolades, it will never feel like enough. Okay. Um, that's struggles with a performance identity. And something that you have to think about is that no achievement could ever fix an identity wound. The root is somewhere along the way, typically in childhood, who you were just without the achievements or the accolades wasn't nurtured, wasn't cared for, maybe was dismissed or overlooked. And the affection and the attention wasn't given to you until you overachieved, until you produced. That's when you started getting what you wanted, right? And you love that feeling. So you spend the rest of your life having this identity wound, but chasing things, people, places, and things to fill that because that's the only way that you can feel like you are acknowledged as a human being. Okay. So let's talk about what research has shown. Um, Psychologists have been studying this for decades. Research shows that perfectionism has increased dramatically over the last 30 years. The need to be perfect, the need to be on, the need to not have your mask slip, that's increased so much over the last 30 years. People today are experiencing, higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of panic attacks. depression, burnout, chronic fatigue, and stress, um, like never before, even more than previous generations. Um, Researchers have also found that when people tie their self-worth to achievement, their mental health becomes extremely fragile. And we're seeing people talk about mental health at an all-time high. Almost everybody I know has a therapist, a counselor, that are we're having conversations of chronic burnout, overachievement. And that, I mean, I'm an 80s baby. I know that was poured into us a lot as children. You know, you can be who you want to be. You know, you could do all these sports, and so you're playing basketball, you're doing soccer, you're doing softball, you're taking dance classes, you're getting awarded. Everything's reinforcing um for your identity to be found in those things, okay? But then as you get older, you realize you're burnt out, you know? Um, because when your value depends on success, every setback feels like you're losing yourself. Okay. So if you're living from that high achieving, overachieving, I have to win mentality, then when you lose anything, any like a a job, a relationship, you feel like you have lost a part of yourself. Okay. This is where we hear a lot the term identity crisis. I remember when I was laid off from a position which was extremely toxic, the whole job, the whole company, so many women were going through so much bullying as well as me being bullied. It was just a toxic, nasty environment. But because we, you know, kind of drank the Kool-Aid and, you know, wanted our golden handcuffs and all of this, we found our identity because part of the job was fun, right? And you were willing to overlook the toxicity. Okay. That's still very unhealthy. And I remember I had silently prayed for like almost a year that something would change in the job. And it did. I ended up getting laid off. But for 6 months after that, I think I had an identity crisis. My body was numb because I was holding a lot of things in. I had short term memory loss for 9 months, which is a manifestation of PTSD. I was in a constant flight and fawn response. And so my central nervous system was all over the place. And then I had to ask myself, who am I outside of this job? I had made this job, this role, this position, I made it my identity all the while it was killing me. It really was. I was in and out of the hospital for almost a year and a half due to stress. And I'm grateful. Hindsight is really 2020 when I've taken a step back and be like, my life was saved and preserved because of the layoffs. I don't know what my health would have looked like this time or last by this time last year. You know, it would have been catastrophic. And so I'm grateful, although shocking, but then it made me realize I had found my identity in these things. So let's talk about where the performance identity first began. If you're new to my channel, I talk about the fractured identities. I talk about the subconscious mind, how you're basically an old operating system. But your subconscious mind is fully formed by the age of 7. And until you go back and change the wiring system, you're going to see everything from that 7-year old brain. You're going to give love from a 7-year-old brain, receive love from a 7-year old mindset, perceive people, places, and things due to what you encountered in that short amount of time in your life. Okay. And we live 95% from our subconscious mind. 5% from our conscious mind, our logic, our willpower, all of that. So sometimes from our subconscious mind is the unconscious mind. We do things unconsciously, right? But it performance identity rarely starts in adulthood. It majority starts in childhood. Um, you're constantly as a child asking yourself, am I loved for simply being who I am? Right? Maybe you grew up in an extremely competitive household. You know, I grew up with family members that were extremely, extremely talented athletes. I mean, like Olympic level athletes. I'm not that type of athlete. My athletic um, thing was through dance, right? But always feeling inadequate. Okay. So then it was like, okay, in order to survive, I needed to perform. How else am I going to perform? Get really good at a sport or get really good at dance or get really good at something else. Okay. I know my parents love me no matter what, but that wasn't the dynamic in our home. And it was also a chaotic and abusive home as well. Um, but children go, in order for me to be emotionally safe, I need to morph into one of these trauma informed identities. So, depending on the home that you grew up in, you either shrunk yourself to become invisible, you either people pleased, you maybe had to become a caretaker to your parents when they should have been taking care of you, or you would have put on the performance identity. And then you learned, in order to make everyone proud, I need to be high achieving, high output, overperforming. If you achieve enough, then you are enough. Maybe you thought that you don't want to disappoint anyone. So that's why you're overperforming. Um, and so again, the strategy might have protected you as a child, but as an adult, you're realizing you're showing up in spaces and in relationships and in interactions and going, this feels so far from me, or I feel like I've lost myself. If any of this resonates with you, definitely comment in the chat, share what you have been struggling with in the performance identity. I'd love to hear your stories. So if you were struggling with that as an adult, you might be right now having a midlife crisis, realizing how tired you are, actually, right? I always like to talk about mother-father wounds because your parents do play a big part on how they shape your reality. And this is not to blame parents. You know, there is no perfect parent. We all are flawed. We all have mistakes, but our parents are essentially our first everything, our first love, the person that gives us the first gifts, the person that makes us feel, or the people that make us feel safe or unsafe. Our parents are usually the first of those things, right? So let's talk about the mother and father wound. So sometimes this performance identity can develop if maybe the way your parents gave you love, it was connected to achievement. So it couldn't just you be being you, waking up, being silly, knocking things over, running into the wall, right? They still loved you. Maybe that wasn't it. But when they saw, right? Because parents can sometimes live vicariously through their children. When they saw the accolades coming in or the ribbons won at the piano, um, recital, all of these things, then they responded to you differently, and you kind of clock that. Okay, well, I want them to respond to me like this all the time, so I have to be a perfectionist, a goody goody person, right? Maybe praise only came after good grades. That was me. Praise came with good grades. Extreme discipline came with bad grades. Maybe making mistakes weren't safe. I know that as a child, there was like really innocent things I would do, and children, they fall down, they spill milk, they they forget their house keys, all of that. But the punishment I received from that was like catastrophic, right? So I got really good at being a perfectionist, not making mistakes. And when I made a mistake, and people always make mistakes, it was debilitating because I had found my identity in not making mistakes. So when I made a mistake, what I would hear is, you're stupid, you're a failure, you're never good enough. Like, excuse me, that's how you learn. You learn by making mistakes. And then as an adult, when I moved into corporate, when I had a few businesses before, I have my own businesses now, when I'd make a mistake in business or make a mistake at work, what would the lie then be that I would agree with? That I'm not worthy, I'm stupid, I'm unsuccessful, right? Um, and then if I do really good, then everyone's gonna love me and approve of me, right? Um, Maybe your parents, again, loved you deeply, but didn't know how to emotionally connect with you. Okay. So maybe they were a present parent, but a distant parent. So, in order for them to come close to you, in your little mind, you were like, well, if I just do all these things well, I make up my bed, I'm a good student, I'm overachieving, I get all A's, then the emotional connection I've been seeking, they're going to give it to me. So essentially, you start manipulating your parents. Okay. And what does that look like as an adult? Maybe your parents were overwhelmed, maybe they were critical, maybe they were absent, whatever the reason, your nervous system learned something powerful that your value depends on what you do. So think about it. Your value depends on what you do and how good you show up and all of that, and you're constantly living from that place the entirety of your life. What's going to happen is you're going to hit a wall and you're going to burn out, and you're maybe have like a little bit of a psychotic break and say, I can't do this anymore. That's a high stand. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. It's a lot. This is when people shut down, they go away, they hide. It's because they can't do that. They can't put that pressure on themselves anymore. Then they go into this whole deconstruct. Who am I really without these things? Okay. The belief that you have to do all these things does not leave when you become an adult. And so this is what I talk about. It follows you into your work, it follows you into a relationship, it follows you into parenting. If you're overachieving, finding that you apologize a lot, if you're overachieving, and how do you act when something doesn't go your way? How do you react when you feel like you were in a situation where you didn't win, you didn't shine? What does that do to your body? That's the question I want everyone to ask. Like what happens through your body? For me, I would feel anxious, and then I get sad, and then I would literally have to shut everything down because I couldn't function. I have to go lay down, take a weekend off, right? Because my identity was so bound by being successful, right? And again, it messes up your leadership, and it messes up, more importantly, the relationship that you have with yourself. We only have one you, right? And so if you're not speaking life into yourself and taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself, you are going to take yourself out of this world sooner than anybody can. All right. So let's talk about why rest feels so hard. One of the biggest struggles with people that have the performance identity is having true rest, not like laying down on the couch, but unplugging and disconnecting from everything. Taking an hour in complete silence is usually typically hard for those that have the performance identity. Rest feels uncomfortable, not because you don't want to rest. Your nervous system doesn't feel safe when you do so. Okay, your brain has learned that productivity equals safety. That stillness can actually trigger anxiety, and I struggled with that because my mind was racing and wouldn't shut off. And it's like, I have to do this. I have to, do all these things. I just can't rest and trust that everything that needs to be taken care of will be taken care of. And there are so many people that feel extremely guilty for not resting. It really is an epidemic. And even when I would go on vacations, I couldn't rest. I'd bring my laptop. I requested time off from work and I still brought my laptop. Okay. That's also control because it's hard for you to let go and delegate. Um, you're unable to sit still without thinking about everything. Again, it's not laziness, it's conditioning. And so there is always a hidden cost that I talk about when you struggle with these fractured identities. When you are in the performance perfectionist identity, on the outside, your life can look extremely impressive to all those that are looking and watching. You're flying here, you're flying there, you're top of this, you're top of that. You have authority in this. People look to you for wisdom for that. But it's quietly destroying yourself, the person living in it. You become successful and you still feel empty. You're admired, but you feel unseen. You're productive, but you still feel like it's never enough. Because performance can earn applause, but it can never create self worth. Okay. Um, and so this is a two-part series, and I'm going to talk about what it does to your mind, body, and soul in part two. When you live from the performance identity, I talk about how autoimmune diseases are formed and cancers and all of that. All you can do each day is make an intention to do the best you can, right? So as we close, we're going to talk about the way forward. Um, the healing the performance and perfectionist identity is not more knowledge about something, and it's not doing things literally, I'm going to think my way through this and all of that. It's actually doing less. So, some of the tools you can start incorporating today is just start pulling stuff off your calendar, right? Um, incorporating a full day of rest where you do nothing, not clean your house, not meal prep, not grocery shop, a day of rest. Okay. Um, it's also noticing ways that have kind of sabotaged your health in your mind and your will and emotions. If you struggled with the performance identity, and then pinpointing, okay, you know what? This is unhealthy for me. In order for me not to perform, maybe today I'm going to do something different. So the pattern for me before was like, I have to perform, I have to overachieve, I have to clean everything, cook everything, fold the laundry, go here, be here for this person, sit at my computer for 12 hours to build something. Or the way I started breaking that pattern is I can close my laptop and can go sit in the park and color and draw and look at the trees or go to the beach or go on a walk or with my dog, or listening to music, just spend a day listening to music and reading the newspaper, right? I'm doing something opposite of what I've done for so long, so I'm starting to reinforce a new pattern that is healthy for me. Okay, so you can start asking yourself, why do I feel like I have to prove myself? Getting to the root. I always talk about getting to the root of things. Asking yourself, when did I first believe that I could not be my authentic self? When did that lie first come in? Oh, that lie came in when my parents were overlooking me. And when I started getting attention is when I started getting straight A's. Okay. Um, or my parent that was present but was emotionally not present, didn't really engage with me until I started winning all these sports awards. So now I have to be an overachiever. Okay. So you want to ask yourself, when did you first learn that you had to do these things? Who taught you this? Meaning it's your atmosphere, a parent, or whatever. Where did I learn that? Is it actually true? 100% of the times it's not true. Okay. So you want to break agreement and break the lies that you had believed with that fractured identity. So as you take the time to begin to separate your achievements with your identity and start also celebrating yourself of just who you are. That's something that I had to do in my process of healing is Jennifer, you're actually really smart. You're a really good writer. You should journal more. You should write more. You're an encourager. So you should take more people out to coffee and encourage them and speak into their life because I have a gift of wisdom, right? And so once I started kind of minimizing my insufficiencies and inadequacies and and speaking to the beautiful things that I possess and I carry, and understand that it's beautiful, right? And it's a value, and I have value and worth. Um, any output and any work that I did from that didn't come from that broken performance identity. It came from me knowing who I am and celebrating that. And because I began the work of what is my true identity and living from that place, everything, every uh, consulting project I stepped into, I didn't have to prove myself. I did everything from a place of rest. I did everything of a place of surety and confidence, authentic confidence. Didn't feel like I had to prove myself or people please or perform. I could just give of myself, and it balanced my nervous system. My health started turning around, all of this. So I just wanted to leave you with some things that you can start thinking about and working on. And I do want to also encourage you that you had been living your life from a fractured identity for such a long time, right? This is all you know. So when you start to begin to do the work of breaking the pattern, that toxic pattern of living from a trauma formed identity and now living in a healthy one, it's going to take time. Okay, because you're now reinforcing, you're introducing a new pattern, and now you're reinforcing and reinforcing that pattern over and over again, right? It's going to take time to, so be kind to yourself. You will get triggered, right? But once you, like, I always like to say, how quickly are you bouncing back from that lie? Maybe as you're doing this work, you start to slide down when you're triggered. Oh no, I'm sliding back into performance. Nope, but I don't need to perform because I know who I am, right? And so I'm just going to take a step back. I'm just going to get quiet and say, I don't have to do that. That's the old me. The new me would show up and say this. Okay. So that's how you begin to do the work. If you want to know more about the work that I do, click the description notes. You can sign up for a discovery call. I coach one-on-one and I also do group coaching. So there's some packages on my website. I also have a digital store. If there's some products, we have a journal, a workbook, two workbooks to help you break the cycle. And then also there's a free trauma informed identity assessment that you can download to see if you struggle with any of these fractured identities. I used to struggle with all seven. Okay. And it wasn't until I started doing the work daily that I was able to break and shift and walk in like truly who I am called to be. And from that place, I've been able to help women from all over the world break those same toxic patterns and cycles, and walk in their true, authentic path in life. So I am a life purpose coach. Um, when women have done this work with me, they have left toxic careers, they have launched businesses, they've gotten out of unhealthy relationships and found healthy ones. So I'm just here to help. And I hope you enjoyed today. Stick around for part two. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day.